welcome everyone. I have here on the line Helen Harrelson, and she is going to talk to us today about a variety of topics. But Helen, I actually don't want to introduce her because she's got such a cool story, and I'm going to let her do that a little bit herself. But I want to say welcome to everybody who's joining us on Zoom. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions along the way, please post them into the chat. And then if we have time, which I hope we will, we can get to those as well. So if everybody in the room could please help me welcome the very amazing Helen Harrelson. So Helen,
go on. So ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to say, could you please introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your current role within the Fountain City and just in terms of playing and all the opportunities that you get?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Helen. You can tell by my accent. I'm not originally from Kansas City, which is where I'm based. I'm from England, but my real accent's from this. I'm from York. If you know anything about brass bands, it's the heart of Yorkshire, where I'm from. I grew up playing euphonium in my local youth band. And then I was really fortunate to get to be part of the National Youth Brass Band of Great Britain, where I met a lot of wonderful, talented people that were really connected in the brass band movement. And then I got to go study at the Royal Northern College of Music around, again, great musicians. My Edward Gregson was the principal at the school at the time, and some great influences. I can talk more about that later, but if anyone has questions, I'm more than happy to talk about that time there. But following that, I was accepted into a band called the Black Dyke Mills Band. I was one of the first females that were allowed to join that band, which was quite an exciting and unique time. Very busy band, toured a lot of places, got to go on some fun trips to Bermuda and Canada. And as a 21-year-old at the time, it was amazing. Spent a lot of time with Foden's brass band and Bramwell Tovey. So my path has not been through the Salvation Army, but I feel that I've kind of walked a parallel path. Most of my friends, most of my influences have come through the Salvation Army, and a lot of the music that I eventually got to play has been inspiring to me. So why am I in Kansas City? How did I get here? We have a group called Fountain City Brass Band that my husband set up 2000 and maybe 1, 2, something like that. And I'm an educator first, especially nowadays. When I was in England, my job was to teach brass and some woodwind. I'd travel around about 15 schools a week, teaching a small cohort of brass instruments mainly, and then I'd teach the kids 2 evenings a week. My background was also in a educational form called Wider Opportunities, which was a government initiative over there trying to get more people to learn to play and have access to instruments. So I feel pretty passionate about students learning to play music, having access to inspirational mentors, and then getting them instruments and straight into the brass band, which I believe is such a great medium for musicians within the various different aspects of the brass band movement. So I landed in Kansas City, and I knew that in America there was a huge wealth of students that played brass instruments in the schools, and so I knew that rather than having to start students from ground up, find an instrument, find ways to get them playing, and teach them how to hold the instruments, there was a lot of students that had already played or had access to instruments and support networks within there. So I was quite lucky. It was different than forming a new group in the UK. That there are a lot of music programs out there with kids playing. So I set out and I sent messages out to a lot of the communities and the band directors saying, we're going to try a brass day. Come along. We're going to play some music in a small group. And then we're going to combine with the adult Fountain City band. They were, I think at the time, pushing one of the forerunners in America for pushing the boundaries of the brass band sound in America. And what I did was music, as you know, in brass band is a chamber ensemble. So to have kids that you've never seen before, don't know their ability, come and play was kind of nerve wracking because you don't know who's coming in, what you've got, and they have to kind of hold down a part on their own. And so I made a lot of edits or additional parts to some of the music that we played. We simplified some parts so that they would be able to come and play in. And one of the big things that I will that's kind of on my heart is we wrote a lot of transcribed parts for players. As many of you know, if you're working between high school musicians and within the brass band tradition, there is a language barrier for many students. And if you work with teenagers, you know that the last thing most teenagers feel comfortable with is kind of making mistakes in front of their peers at times. And so having to perform on an instrument, playing harder music than they ever played or really ever played before, in a whole new language clef was something that I didn't want to put the students under. And so something that I've always done is write the music in the clefs that my students will feel most comfortable in for those first middle school and high school years. Now, the band's program's been going for a long time now, and we have a collegiate group that feed into the adult band now, and they're expected to read the real clefs. But that's a big part of my what I think has been successful for the program, because the students are enhancing what they're doing in the middle schools rather than adding another layer to how they play. So there's lots of aspects of going into setting up this program and getting the right scheduling, making sure that you're able to schedule when you can get people there. The program's now, well, before pre-COVID, we were about 120, 130 students in the program. We're really excited about that. And so that's kind of a little bit about my background. I've talked a lot without any questions yet, but that's kind of where we're at. Beth, is there anything that you think I've missed?
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really interesting because not only do you have the experience as a player, but also as both a band leader and a band developer, really, a program developer. Could you just talk a little bit about your strategies to get people involved in this program? You talk about having 120 plus people within, I think last I counted, is it 4 youth bands you have?
Yes, we were up to 4 youth before COVID.
Right. And so every time I see you guys at NABA, I swear you get bigger. So can you talk about how you've done that, how you've been successful just recruiting and just getting the people to come into these programs?
Well, honestly, brass band music, firstly, recruits itself. The music that you pick, the music that you play, the nature of the ensemble for brass and percussionists is very exciting. I find there's a whole range of various ability music. Again, if it's in the right clef and it's accessible for the students. And so a lot of the times, the students that maybe were playing the euphonium part in their wind ensemble that were actually maybe potentially under challenged, suddenly they're kind of like the prima donna of the brass band at times, with lots of features and lots of solos, if I can say that, euphony plays, sorry. And it's a whole new light on their skill and their technique, and they can shine, and their sound is brought out, it's not hidden, and things like that. So the music, for one, has to be, because that's the language, that's where we connect, that's where we all connect in the ensemble, is through the music. And if the music is not doing with the mission, and exciting as well, and talking to the students on various levels, then that for me has to be the first thing that you put in place, because yes. And then the second thing, I was really blessed to be around some great musicians in the band. Some people that were college professors, were looking for time to volunteer, some retired band directors that had connections. I mean, I got planted in halfway around the world with no real connection. So I had to kind of do a lot of networking and ask a lot of questions and be humble in how I approached people. The local Walmart gave us food and water for the first expo that we did because we didn't have a budget. Lots of just ask, pray and ask, and a lot of these things will find their way. Yeah, the staff, having a great team of players and staff willing and wanting the best for the students. That was another recruiting factor, making sure that you've got some people that are engaging and have something to offer the students. If you have students that come out in today's society, if you have students that come out and take time to be with you, they've made a commitment to get off their electronics or, away from their homework that's due the next day. They might not want to do it, but they should be doing it, So they've taken time to be with you. So what can you inspire them to take home and keep going? And so the staff, the content are important. And then honestly, the biggest thing, we kind of ran that model of two bands for about 2-3 years and kind of got the groundwork going, got our name into the community. The biggest thing that we ever did that cemented our youth program was we took a trip to the Great American Brass Band Festival. And those students that travel together, that bond together, play better together. They have a deeper knowledge. They're not playing for themselves, especially students that we found in our programs that were coming because maybe they wanted an extended option. They wanted more. And not saying that the high schools don't offer great programs, but just something additional. But they're often come to a school and don't know anyone else in the program. They're coming for I don't mean this to sound in a selfish way or a negative way. They're coming for their own needs, and then when we actually travel with the band, they got to really invest, and then they were playing for something bigger than themselves, and so that many of those students that took that trip, gosh, was that 2013, with us. Are still connected to the program today. We couldn't get rid of them. That's why we used to age out at 18. And now we age out. We just don't age out. We have a collegiate band, and some of our students don't make it all the way through college. They go get jobs, and we're like, "Oh, you like playing brass band? We've trained you. We've worked with you since you were 9 years old, or whatever. Just come and play. Just come and play. It's fine. Don't worry. We're not going to worry about the boxes that we have to tick or the restraints there. Let's just come play." And I think sometimes within the organisation, maybe with outside of Salvation Army, sometimes within our community bands or within the NABA bands, those restrictions sometimes can inhibit us.
Yeah, they definitely can. Thank you for that. I think I'm going to switch gears and just talk more about the playing side of it. You mentioned, the euphonium players being divas, and yeah, I totally agree. They can be.
No, I'm only
I'm
joking.
me as well. I love the euphonium sound, and you touched on that. So I just want to talk about that. We had Phil Smith on yesterday, and he stressed sort of the same thing that you did, just the importance of sound. And he talked about, his philosophy on sound and working on that both in, his own private practice and just, how to develop that. So I was just wondering if you could do a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, sure. Sound. No one, you can play fast, slow. It doesn't matter how fast or high you can play. If you have a bad sound or a bad tone, no one's going to want to hear you play high, fast if it doesn't sound particularly beautiful. So, tone is the most important thing that you can do, getting that resonant sound, filling out the air with that. Now, tone. I'm sure I can't believe that I'm on the same kind of program with some of the people that you have here. So I'm not even going to try and talk again about some of the stuff that he probably talked about. But one of the things in terms of tone as an educator, as a young early years educator, I've got a couple of things that I want to kind of just mention if you're working with students that can really help with the tone. When I first became a teacher, I'd find that you would find students that, hold on, let me get my mouthpiece. There it is. I'm not going to try playing just yet. That when they play, people are so like desperate to get high notes that I don't know if you can see, they'll pocket air underneath here. And so that's one of the key things as an educator to look out for within your groups is this pocketing of air down here. A lot of, I see a lot of euphonium and baritone and horn players do that. I'm not so, I don't know if it's quite as fervent in the trumpet player world, but a lot of those players pocket this air down here, and it's probably because you can get away with it because it's a bigger mouthpiece. I haven't noticed tuba players will do that sometimes too. And it's just a little bulge at the bottom here, and what that does, it actually pushes the lip tighter onto the top lip, and it fakes you being able to get a high note. It replicates the same kind of, you know, the mechanics of getting high notes, but it has its own problems when you come to clarity and consistency and stamina and things like that. So if you have players that are kind of squeezing and pocketing and bulging on there, it's really not, you're not in control of the embouchure, and so sometimes the tone up there will seem really squeezed and tight when they're playing high. So that's a little trick to watch out for. I find a lot of students do that, especially when they get to high school and they start having, and I don't know, every state's different, but a lot of my high school students will have to audition for state auditions, you know, if they want to be in district band, state band, and a lot of the time the freshman, sophomore players are given this music that's beyond their range, and so they'll try and find a cheat to do it. And that's one of the cheats that I find a lot of people do just to squeeze up there. The other thing that I want to mention just for tone, things to work on as an educator, from an early years educator standpoint. Let me find my notes here. Obviously, they're puffing the cheeks out. We all know that's not ideal. We've seen it when they start out. But a lot of people can slide through, and that's how they end up playing at high school as well. A couple of different ways that I was taught to do that, you know, maybe a golf pencil or something, or I guess a straw, cut a straw in half, something that's not too long, it's not going to overbalance you. I don't have a golf pencil, but I've got a kind of back end of a pen. I'm not going to put the lead in my mouth, that's gross. But if you're able to sit with a pencil inside your mouth, and it's going to start, or straw, it's going to start keeping this in the right place. Okay, it's going to make sure that this is here. The straw is ideal because you can then blow through the middle of the straw, just like your instrument. It works really well for the lower brass instruments because, you know, the size of the aperture, the hole in here, if you can get a smaller straw, that's really great. But it's going to keep these muscles in here, and you can do that while you're playing video games, watching TV, whatever you're doing, driving to school, driving to work, whatever that looks like. And it just trains these muscles to be in place. It trains them, not just keeping them in place, but you're breathing and breathing out the air at the same time. So there's a lot of that motion that's in there. So again, I've got bags and bags of these tricks, but I chose 3 of my most common ones to try and help you guys with. And the last thing, tone, articulation. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about airflow, the column of air, the breathing. I mean, that is paramount. That's where the tone has to come through. That's the fuel for it. But some of the mechanisms again can infringe the tone and the clarity.
We lost you. Oh, there you're back. I'm sorry, we missed the last few things you said. You froze. You were just talking about the column of air.
Yeah, and so
and it being the fuel.
That's the fuel. But if you have to have some techniques that will help have that clear sound, and so the articulation for me is important within that tone. And so just try saying, if you say p for me, say the syllable p. If you'll try that and think about p, p, p. What's happening to your jaw? What's happening to your lip as you say p, p, p? And I find a lot of students, when they start and come through, that's the syllable that a lot of them will try and do, the p, 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 p. And so this part of the lip is bouncing and coming down. And that's something that you, if you can get your ear into the bell of the instrument, you'll hear, as you say p, 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 there's like a little fuzzy sound to the start of that. And if you can get your ear up to the bell of the instrument, you can actually start to hear that p, if you're in the front of an ensemble and you can't always tell that that's what's going on, but if you get up and have, if you get some small group time, you can get that ear in there and you can tell. And obviously that's going to cause problems with playing fast, playing high, because as soon as that bottom lip is relaxed, the sustained high playing, this is just going to have to relax every time, and it's going to get so complicated to try and do that. So that's something to listen out for, to see if someone is actually articulating properly, which will, once they can do that, obviously it expands the whole instrument. But then what to do, how to fix that if someone has played like that for a long time or got away with that for a long time. And I like to play a game called Say It, Play It. And I'm sure you've heard all these tricks before, probably. But the Say It, Play It game, if you cannot say it, you cannot play it. The instrument is just a very expensive, amplification of everything that's happening behind your lips, behind your teeth, really. And so if you can't say it, you can't play it. And using the articulations, again, I'm a low brass player, so I like the do do dee dee da da, keeping the tongue down there. Trumpet players will maybe have different opinions on where and preferences on where that is, but that works for me really well. And so I have a Say It, Play It game, like a little copy echo game, where say it, and they'll say it, or into the mouthpiece. Do do do. Oh, here we go. I can do it. If you'd all got your mouthpiece, I should have told you to bring it. So you can say it. Do 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 do, and then you can say back. Say it. Do 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 do. Try it back again. Buzz it. Have them try buzzing. Then you can have it near the instrument, pop it and play it. You can have say it, play it, say it, play it. The idea is that you keep it going back and forward. You don't take a break in between. So maybe, unless it's like a 2 count. So I'll say it, da, and they'll say da, 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 play it. Da, 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 da. And as the brain takes over, they have to then, if they've found a way that they've always played it before, and they're saying it properly, they have to readjust their face in 4 counts to do it. And then they're able to identify what the modifications are. You can see it, and sometimes if you keep going over that time, eventually those modifications aren't needed. They're able to just stay in the same place from say it to play it on the instruments, from buzzing and things like that. And that is a warm-up activity to lessons, a warm-up activity for bands. Obviously, big full group education is it's hard to get on these specifics. It's hard to hear what's going on at times. I'm sure most people are much better than I am at this, but I cannot always hear if my tuba player is not tonguing properly back there. And so it's a great way to get out some of the sound. And I'm not a big mouthpiece buzzer. I know a lot of people do really love doing the mouthpiece warm-ups and things like that. But for me, the mouthpiece, my preference is that I can hear if people, in terms of articulating properly, and I can get on there and we can do some of those activities. I can walk around the band. I can just hear the tubas. I can hear the trombones, and I'm not overpowered with the sound of the instrument and the tuning and all the other things that come when those instruments come on. We take away a lot of that stuff. So does that kind of answer some of your questions and give you some tips?
Yeah, I think that's great. A lot of really practical things in there to try, especially the mouthpiece thing and just being able to isolate that. I think there was a lot of really great tips in there. I do see some of our folks taking notes, so that was great. You mentioned high range a couple of times in there, and just sort of some of the problems that can creep in when attempting to play something that is outside of your comfortable range. Could you talk to us a little bit about exercises that you've used yourself to increase your range, and maybe that some exercises that you've given your students to help increase their range as well?
Yeah, I mean, scales are the easiest thing to put down there. Scales are the easiest thing. And I'm going to use treble clef vernacular. I feel like I'm in a friendly audience that I'm able to do that. When I talk to many American youth programs, I have to put my translation hat on. But I'm going to talk in my brass band home pitch here. So I feel like often you hit the wall when you come to the harmonics, often when you have to jump over the next harmonic. So like maybe from your C up to your D, first valve D, as you're going through your first octave scale, your third space C up to D. That for beginners can sometimes give it a little bit of a push. And then from the G over to the A, that's often another hurdle. Sometimes the E to the F, I find that's for some reason that's easier than those two. They tend to be the real sticking points within there. But sometimes again the E to the F are the hard ones. And then just going over, pushing over that boundary. And I think often this obviously scales are beautiful. Don't try and do the full range of the scale. You know, a concert, 2-octave concert B flat major scale, like most of the high school students that I work with have to do. And then they're like, right, I'll start at the bottom, I'll go all the way to the top, rather than, right, I'm going to take this snapshot of the world and I'm going to train here. I'm going to bench press. I'm going to lift some weights and try and get that done. So rather than try and do the whole thing up and down, maybe focus on the third space C, C, D, E, F, and then just push over the F and come back down. Try and working just one above your comfort level, not two above your comfort level, not three above your comfort level to get the full thing. One note only above your comfort level. And making sure that you're engaging that diaphragm to push over, and try your best to sing on that note. We don't want to add too many too soon, because then we're straining. It's like a high jumper taking an easy high jump and then going, I'm not worried about this bit, I'm gonna go for this bit up here. That's not going to happen. You have to gradually progress. But as musicians, I think we feel like we can do that. Right here, no, put it up to the top, gold medal, let's go for that one. Who cares about the progress? You know, we're just going to go for the high one. And again, that's where the poor technique can really set in too soon if you're not careful. So long tones popping over that, honestly, and then arpeggios through there, up and down. There's tons of like the Visuti books, there's tons of the Arbon books, there's loads of those ranges, but for me, nothing is better than scales and just sitting in that range and just a little window of those notes and working on them and getting to feel where those muscles live.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I'm assuming you mean that they would slur those scales, right, to just keep that airflow going, or do you practice it with an articulation as well?
Oh, good question. Yeah, first I would slur. I would slur all the time, because if your airflow is not right, then if you're trying to use your tongue to give it the extra pizzazz to kick it out, sometimes you can use your tongue to just, especially if you're a bit tired, the tongue can help kick out that note just a little bit. But that's what we want to avoid. We want the air support to be doing the work. We don't want the pushing on. We don't want the tongue. I mean, obviously it helps. It's going to help, but primary number one has to be your air support. So slurring through there, and then that's where you might add the tongue, because the tongue position is going to be in a different place as you're going higher. Make sure that your tongue position, especially in the lower brass, I believe it's from your do's to your d's. Do at the bottom of your mouth, D. The angle of that tongue is going to have a big influence on your upper register. I have a lot of students that haven't kind of grasped that concept. And so as you're getting higher, that tongue's going to pivot, and help get those upper ranges. So if you're trying to use the do on some of your upper registers, it's just not just not going to be successful for you. So yeah, then add the tongue afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you. I know you mentioned earlier also talking about some of these bad habits that can creep into the embouchure, and like if you have the puffy air underneath or in the cheeks. Can you just talk a little bit about how you would go fixing somebody's embouchure? I'm thinking to some of our potential leaders here who may inherit a program, or maybe they're teaching the junior band, but the kids already started in beginner's band, let's say, and they've got a couple of bad habits that have crept in, and they've noticed them, like you've said, but now how do they solve those problems?
That is really tough. It's tough. But I think for your program, it's worth trying. Now there are some embouchures that they might look broken and you might want to fix them, and you shouldn't. I know great players that don't have setup, that don't have the prime setup, or but they do really well. it can be choppy waters when you start talking about embouchures and changing embouchures, and getting if you're not confident with stuff like that, put yourself around people and ask questions on the instrument, especially for people that play those instruments. You've got a great support network, I'm sure, of great educators and great performers. Um, Ask them for advice and help, because it can really make a player, but if it's addressed the wrong way, you can actually really kind of turn a player off, because there is an element of having to go back a step before you're able to go forward, and picking the age, picking where a student's at, knowing your student before you go in and start changing anything is really important. You have to have a relationship with the student, and that they trust you and that they want to do this for you. If you inherit a program and come in and right, we're going to change this straight away. I think it's knowing when to pick, and I don't want to use the word battles because that's not the right word for it, but knowing when to pick your focus and how you're going to do that, knowing how the student will respond to that. Drip feeding a couple of those things at the beginning of rehearsals so that everyone can try that, rather than pinpointing one student and say, you've got a bad embouchure. Just have everyone do those exercises, just build it into your daily, and then you can just, pop out, oh, this one's a great one. Hey, so and so, have you tried this one? And then it gives you an access in point into there. You might say, hey, it's not quite working right now. Do you want to spend 5 minutes after practice? We can go over that in a bit more detail. And then again, teenagers, all of us, I'm the same, I'm 40 odd, and I don't want to be picked out and singled out in front of people. So just having those conversations, again, those three things that I talked about, they are key things that I see a lot in my years of teaching. But being concise, don't spend a whole lesson on that with younger students, because they're just going to get disheartened with it. Give them small snippets for success. And if it doesn't work the first lesson, if you fixed it at the beginning and they go back to some bad habits and things like that, just try and keep drip feeding positivity within there. Now, if you've got a student that's like, music's my everything, I need to do this, and that might be a different approach, but you'll know that because you've spent time learning your students and being with them.
So I could keep asking questions for a long time because you're a wealth of knowledge, but I do want to give an opportunity here. If we have any questions in the chat or we have any questions in the room, I just want to make sure I'm taking time for that. So I'm just going to stare at them.
Can I add one thing before we go question and answer? Because there's one thing I do want to bring up, and I'll do it really quickly.
No, definitely take as much time as you want.
It's the middle of the band sound. That is what makes a brass band a brass band. Your middle of the band, your horns and your baritones. That's the world that I live in. That's the soundscape. The horns, the baritone section, combined with the euphoniums and the flugel. That is the uniqueness. Like, a lot of people say, what makes up a brass band sound? And there are lots of different things, but there is no ensemble that has that, from the back row cornets that blend to the flugels, to the horns, to the baritones that have the trombones, the cohesiveness of the ensemble. The brass timbre is important. If you have a band and you want to build your sound, 2 tips. First one, and this is, I grew up using the red hymn books. I'm sure many people know those books, but any kind of quartet hymn books would work for the brass band. There's lots of different publications out there.
Those are just our tune books. You can use our tune books. It's basically, the red books are like a very truncated version of our tune book.
Yeah, and then you get your horn section. You put part 1 on your flugel, maybe your solo horn. Actually, you can do this however you want. If you want your horn section, put your solo cornet or part 1 on your flugel, your alto part 2, which is your normal solo horn part. You can put your first horn, your normal first horn, put on the second horn book usually in this, and then you can put your third horn, or your second horn in the brass band, put them on the E flat bass part, and you have a quartet ready made there. So your section is already starting to think and blend. You can add the baritones into this to try and blend that horn section, the middle of the band. You can also start bringing in your seconds and third cornets to this, because your second and third cornets are a gateway from the cornet section to the middle of the band. If you think about the nature of the instruments and how they work, you have usually a boatload of cornets and only a few in the middle of the band. The nature of those instruments, you cannot outplay the cornets, horn players. You cannot outplay the cornets. The second and third cornets, your back row cornets, are your friends, and they need to learn when to be a cornet and when to try and be a horn player. So as you're doing that exercise, bring in those back row cornet players so they're listening across and learning to blend and the euphoniums. And then the other thing is to teach your band to listen and blend down to that section as well, because you don't want to overplay a horn or a baritone, because it has this kind of crack sound when you try and go too loud. It's like a foghorn. They used to call it, when let's say it's called a barren tone at times, because if you play it too loud, there's actually no tone. It's just vibration. And this is a Bramwell Tovey. If you've heard of the famous conductor Bramwell Tovey, he brought this to Foden's. And he was trying to get me to play louder and fill out my instrument a bit more. But he was also saying, this is the player that you have here. If you go to a competition, if you go to a performance, this is what she's got. You're going to have to work, like any community, you work with players. And so he would give me the solo cornet part to the book. He would say, solo cornets don't play. And I was the melody of the band. It was hidden in the middle of the band. And if you play too loud, you cannot hear that sound. So the band had to start listening down to find that sound. And he would just move that book around the band for different instruments, be it the soprano cornet or the solo cornet, move it around the band for whoever he wanted to either play out or have the band listen around to as well. And so that's a great way to have your band be aware of those sounds in the band, and also have those players have the confidence to lead and bring out their parts. I'm sorry, I kind of digressed a little, but I think that's
No,
really important.
that's really cool. I think I'm going to try that. That's a great idea. Just if I can, for just a quick second, point of clarification. So in a contesting band, their parts are labeled slightly different than we do in the Salvation Army. So second and third cornets is the same as our first and second cornets. Okay, so we have a question in the back, and I'm going to make him come forward to ask you.
Hi, I'm Dave Bartel. I just had actually two questions. We'll sneak it in here. Can you give your method of helping kids, helping adults with extending their range? Anything where they're at, if it's to or a second cornet player that plays a C scale and I wanted to have a G correctly, or if it's my solo cornet, how to get them up to that, not a double high C, but G above that. And then second of all, do you have any literature that was like a favorite horn solos or favorite baritone solos, not euphonium, but like actually baritone solos?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the range, again, those scales that I know they're not particularly favorites of my students that they work with. Scales, it's again, and I probably could do better about finding ways that I could make them a little more fun as well. But they are like just pushing the next boundary within there. The airflow, the air support, the articulations, the diaphragm, pushing the air column. Honestly, it starts with the air and it starts with the diaphragm for those. So making sure, finding some airflow games. I used to have a teacher that would put 5 pounds on the wall and say, if I could beat him to hold that 5 pounds up on the wall with my airflow, with my column of airflow, with my diaphragm, I got to keep it, and that made me practice a little bit harder, because I get 5 pounds if I was able to extend longer than him, So making sure that you have the support, you're not pushing on here. That's that's crucial for the range. Again, for the lower instruments, for the baritones, euphoniums, sometimes the students don't realize to extend the lower register about the dropping the jaw a little bit, opening the aperture, and to get the resonance. The oral cavity has to be open inside. So when I'm getting those, 1 or 3 low Gs or whatever, or pedal Cs or something, I'm right down there. Oh, it's all open back here, and I feel like I look really weird. When I play, but the resonance is happening inside. So the lower register, lots of pedal tones, and keeping that, making sure that a lot of students that will try and keep the jaw steady in the lower instruments again, know that they're aware that they can bring that down and make sure those teeth are definitely nowhere near each other when you're doing that. And then literature, gosh. The horn and baritone literature has increased so much since when I was at college. A couple of my favorites that I play with the band. I really like the old standards. I love the old Donegal bays and things like that. But if you the best place to look for the resources for you guys would be if you go on to Owen Farr, who's a tenor horn player. He has some great literature that's on there. And then Katrina Masala, she's the baritone player, played with Black Dyke for a long time. She really was pushing the boundaries for repertoire for the baritone. She has a lot of great music that was written for her. And commissioned, that she played with the band and did some great CDs with all that stuff. So they would be my honestly, because everyone's tastes different, but they would be my go-to places to find some great music. I honestly, one of my favorites was a piece that was called Colors by one of my a former student at the RNCM, and it was for a baritone and wind quintet. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out now that has some great opportunities. Lucy Pankhurst is writing some great music as well for that group, this kind of middle of the band. I will say a lot of my American friends don't know about the RNCM, the Associated Board Schools of Music repertoire for younger players. In the UK, we have what we call a graded music system, exam system. And so if you go onto ABRSM or Trinity Guildhall, they have a whole lot of repertoire that's really nice repertoire for students, ranging from 1 octave in your grade, what we call grade 1, not school grade 1, but level 1 exams, right the way through to like the concertos, the Horowitz in level 8. But it gives you great study books. There's a lot of new music written by new composers, Pete Meekin, Tom Dvorin. There's a lot of Edward Gregson, Philip Spark writing studies, people that really know brass pedagogy. And there's a lot of people don't know of those resources over here, or don't use those they're not method books, they're study books or solo compilations and things like that. But there is some great resources on there.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you want to type that website in the chat so people got that. Can you say it again for him?
I'll see if I
or you can just type it in the chat.
Yeah, it's their ABRSM. I don't know what it is, but if you just type ABRSM, I think it's .com. That would be one. And then Trinity Guildhall. I think they're just called Trinity now, but they have curriculums for every instrument. They have tenor horn, they have soprano cornet, they have flugelhorn, they've got baritone, trombone, E-flat bass, and everything in there. So if you are wanting to put, if you've got an E-flat bass player that's playing on an E-flat bass and you really want to push them down, that they have all access to. And again, it's not just easy basic stuff. It's concerto level music as well.
That's great. Thank you for that resource. Looks like we have one more question here from the field. Alexis, you want to come forward?
Hello.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to hear you speak. My name's Alexis. In your experience when you're teaching younger players, what has been your go-to when trying to keep them engaged? Like, is there anything that works for you in terms of keeping them focused and wanting to be in class
That's tough.
or
It's different
in
for every
rehearsal?
student. No, it's tough, and with every student, it's a different thing. Friends, friends is a good thing for them, which of course I would say was the same for me. I enjoy making music with my friends. And more as I'm getting older, that does play a part if their friends are around them or they have a group of friends. Um, there's a whole topic of the psychology of a teenage brain, but you know, we're making sure that there's a group of friends that they are with, be it either their friends from school or that they have connections. Because sometimes I got bullied at school for being a musician, but I had great friends in my youth band, which wasn't through the school, and so it didn't bother me that I got bullied at school because I knew I was having fun. I had some great group of friends. They were the people that knew me and got me, not the people at my school that were just making a quick comment about me. So the friends that they make, or the relationships, the opportunity to build relationships and mentors is strong. It has to be strong. It really has to be strong, and that's nothing to do with the music. That's, you look at any activity, you look at any sport, anything like that. That's why successful programs are successful. Again, music. There's things that have to be accomplished. Accomplished. You have to teach the basics. You have to whatever. But having fun, it might be at the end that you might ask, okay, so tell me your favorite theme tune. What's your favorite thing that you do? And next week maybe you set them the homework. Well, try and try and figure out that melody. Can you play your trumpet? Does it have to be written music? Can you figure out the melody to that song? And maybe you'll say, well, don't tell your people in your group, and can you come and play it for them, and will they recognize it? Some things that get them away from sometimes notation reading. That's some of my students. We try and stay away from notation for a while because it's a barrier for them at times. And so playing by ear and having fun and making up tunes that if someone came around, if grandma came around and it was her birthday and they'd not learned happy birthday on their instrument, but they'd feel comfortable enough to go, I think I can figure this out. I did this in band, and my teacher, so just fun little tunes that they can do, or ways that can have them access the music or relate to the music.
Thanks. Does anybody else in the room have any questions? Hunter, I feel like you need to have a question. Oh, all right. We've got a question back here. We got two.
You mentioned pedagogy. This is, could you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by this word?
That word for me means how I think about music and how I want people to think about music, the way that I access teaching and learning, and I'd say that's a two-way street, but actually if you're working with younger students, it's a three-way street. It's with the parents as well. So pedagogy is how I approach something as a teacher, how I want that to manifest, how I prepare for that, the music that I pick. I spend ages picking music, and then how I want them to respond from the way that I teach. What are the outcomes? What are they going to learn? Things like that. That's the aspect, and then also partnering with the parents. How can the parents help support the students? We used to have those practice sheets. I don't use those in my school because I think sometimes it's an encouragement to maybe tell a little fib or not the truth or sign someone's signature. I tend not to use those in my school very often. But asking the parents to to hold their student accountable to practice it. I'm a parent of an 8-year-old. I know that's the hardest thing to try and do, get a student to do, or a parent, get your child to do something that they don't want to do at times. But finding ways, encouraging them, give them, even if they can't get them to do, say, hey, here's I don't know, Maurice Murphy, check out the video of this guy playing, or of a trumpet player. Just encourage them to listen. Or here's a great clip of Star Wars. Ask your kid to listen to the trumpet player on this. Or have it on in your car as you're driving to school, so they get to hear that sound. It doesn't always have to be right. Instrument out. Do your 5 exercises and put it away. Check, we've got it done. There are bigger things that the parents can do, because most of my parents haven't played an instrument before and wouldn't know where to start with helping their student, but they can put music in front of them. They can be playing stuff at, as they're cooking dinner, or things like that. So pedagogy, yes. And yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
I think so. You'll have to excuse Aaron. He's been asking everyone the same question all week because everyone keeps using the same word. It's been great. We've gotten different answers from everyone. So that's really, really great. Thank you. It looks like Tom has a question.
So you touched on repertoire a little bit. We've heard from several different people and several different philosophies about how to choose repertoire for your group. And I was just wondering, do you aim for your top players, for your bottom players? Like, what is your philosophy about the difficulty level when you select music?
Well, when I was trained as an educator, not as a music teacher, just an educator, the idea of differentiation was a big part of being a classroom teacher. And they said, when you set a target in a class, you should have all, most, and some. And so making sure that when you pick a program, there should be a piece that all can achieve, everyone. There should be a piece or an activity or an outcome that most shall achieve. And then there's maybe that little extra extension that some may be able to achieve. And I think that's important in picking a program or picking music, that there has to be something that, I remember being the second baritone in my band. Actually, I think I was the second baritone player in my band when I first came up. And I remember I joined when the band was just about to go to a big music festival or something, and they seemed that they could play all the music, and I just looked at it and I think I played just maybe the last note on every piece that we played, because I knew that it was finished. But I played a note, and I was part of that chord, and I was part of that sound, and I realized where I got to go. And a lot of students just need to know where they've got to go at times. So don't be scared of picking something that's too easy, and work on the details. Have your more advanced players push them, like, no, you can't breathe there, that's not a phrase, extend that longer. Where are you going to use vibrato? No, not here. Where are you going to use it? You can push, and then so the players, yep, F sharp second valve, spot on, we've got that. Check your key signature. There's different conversations within that piece that you can have with individual players. And then the more advanced piece, picking something that's beyond the possible realms of performance, successful performance, we should say. And that's difficult, but it is important to do, because that's where those kids will go, oh yeah, some of those kids, but having structure in there as well. Maybe on that piece is where you bring in a couple of ringers on there, you bring in a few friends to play and support. Maybe it might be like, okay, my back row cornets can't double tongue, so we're just going to have them go bop 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 here, and give them ways to access the music without feeling like they can't. So yeah, in terms of ability wise, picking music, obviously mission focused, that's very important. But also having something that's going to have something that they can relate to and touch to in terms of genre specific. And that might be making sure that your percussionists maybe can add something to it, or not being scared to create or ask newer composers to write something for your group. I could talk forever, but I think that's probably the biggest snapshot.
It sounds great. I think we only have a couple more minutes, so I think I'm just going to ask you one final question, if that's okay. It's something we've asked most of our guests, but I've neglected to ask you so far today. And that's just about your own personal practice regimen and how you handle that. So I'm sure that's changed over the years, but just where you are now, and to stay at a high level that you can play in a group like Fountain City in a typical non-COVID year, what would your practice session look like?
Yeah, in a non-COVID year, I'm not going to pretend I'm something that I'm not. When I was at school and at college, I was playing a lot. I was gigging a lot. I had a lot of rehearsals, and I was lucky that I was around people who formed a lot of great fundamentals and helped me work through a lot of that stuff. So, doing the graft and doing a lot of that work early on has meant that as I've got older, have a family, band director, finding time is tough. It really is tough. And I'm definitely nowhere near that I would like to be. But to stay in shape for the big performances with Fountain City, a lot of the time I'll have my mouthpiece on my desk at work. And if I'm doing email, I might have my music up on my window. I'll print it out and I'll put it on my it's not a window, it's like a window into my band room, and I'll put it up there. And I feel like if I cannot say it, I cannot play it. So some of the groundwork is done through, again, just popping the mouthpiece on, getting playing. But there is nothing that doesn't replicate time on the horn and those kind of things. So the long tones, the flexibilities that I was taught, like the arb and stuff. I play with my students at school as much as I can. And that's, again, time is tight for a lot of people, especially when family comes along. And if you're in education, there's always an email, there's always a parent, there's always something. And so finding those short little moments where you can grab a little bit of time to stay on there and keeping the mechanics going are really important. Some people manage it, they'll stay up an extra hour at night after maybe their kids go to bed and things like that, or just set the alarm a little bit earlier in the morning, things like that. I know that there's my husband's got this little ring type buzzer you can buy, and it's on a little stick. It looks like an eyeglass at times but it's like just the rim rather than hold the mouthpiece, and it's just a rim that you can play and buzz through and things like that. But yeah, staying in shape, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly in shape, but that was those moments, having the mouthpiece, having the music around, and having your bulk of maybe 5-10 little exercises that you can go to when your instrument's out. You may be waiting for the pasta to cook, and you can just pop yourself through those quick 5-10 minutes of warm-ups or activities. Or right, I did flexibility today, I'm going to do tonguing today, and being really focused on those.
Thanks. I think that's great and very honest. I know I find myself in the same boat. Life is very different now than it was when we were in college. So I think those real practical tips are very helpful. If you can all afford 2 hours of practice, bless you. But some of the rest of us just don't have the hours in the day at this point. So I think that is great. Helen, thank you so much for your time and your valuable insight. We appreciate it so much.
I really appreciate being here, and I'm honored to be asked to join the group. And please know, if I can ever be of help, one of my big missions is to increase awareness of the movement. And so I am all ears. Anyone needs anything, let me know.
Thank you so much, Helen. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.